Good morning and good evening to everyone around the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Puck Drop Podcast, where we will be recapping week 10 of the NHL season. The holidays are just around the corner. I got my Christmas tree up. We just had our first snowfall here in South Korea. Things are always extra cheerful this time of year, and thankfully the hockey season is also contributing to that. For me, at least, we're seeing some great hockey. Despite my team not doing so well, it's all good. I officially know someone close to me in my life that has burnt their hockey team's jersey. I always wondered what kind of person does that, and now I know. My good buddy, he's a Sens fan and a Chargers fan, and it's just tough times for him. Both his teams are playing like shit, but cheer up, Scotty. It's almost Christmas time. Maybe your boys will turn it around. Who knows? Anyway, let's dive into this weekly recap like we always do by taking a look at the NHL standings and, of course, some familiar faces still leading the way up top. We got Vegas back on top in the NHL with 47 points. However, they do have more games played and therefore not the best point percentage in the NHL. The Rangers and the Bruins in third and fourth place, respectively, both have played 29 games and 43 points. The Vancouver Canucks sit in between those, just above Rangers and Bruins. They got 44 points in 32 games, same amount of games as the Vegas Golden Knights. The Nashville Predators might be the hottest team in the NHL right now. They hold the longest win streak at 4 games, but they've also won 13 of their last 16 games. They are streaking up the standings. They're now in 13th place in the league with 36 points in 31 games. But honestly, no team has impressed me more than the Philadelphia Flyers. They've won 6 of their last 7 games. They are way higher on the standings than anyone thought, especially me. I had them finishing real low. I have a buddy here who's a Flyers fan. I'm a Habs fan, and I pretty much guaranteed him that the Habs were going to do better than the Flyers this year. Not because I had faith in my guys, but I really did not like what the Flyers had to offer, on paper at least. But Tortorella is getting the best out of these guys. They're playing incredible hockey. They're getting production from up and down their lineup. Carter Hart has finally stepped into the role of being, a number one goalie as he's supposed to be. And then their backup, Samuel Ersson, has been playing great hockey too. This team, a lot of people thought were going to be sellers throughout the season, maybe even early in the offseason, trading guys like Travis Konechny or even Carter Hart, but I wonder now if they're still thinking the same way. Konechny's leading the team. He's on a 40-goal pace. Right now he's got 16 goals and 9 assists for 25 points in 30 games. Right behind him, Sean Couturier, who's finally having a healthy season. The guy's been, he's had a lot of injury trouble the past few years, but he's showed flashes of brilliance early in his career. He's had 2 70-point seasons, and he's a very good two-way center. He's a Selke nominee usually, when he's healthy, that is. And then Travis Sanheim, their guy on the backhand, he's been playing some incredible hockey. A former first-round pick back in 2014, he never really found his game as a bona fide top-pairing defenseman, but this season, he's having a breakout year. He's really proving that he should be a number 1 or number 2 guy on a solid hockey team. He plays over 25 minutes a game. He's got the 4th most time on ice per game in the NHL. He's really earning his spot. John Tortorella is trusting him in every situation. He's got that offensive side to his game. He's a shutdown D-man. He's hard to beat. Big body, 6'4", 222 pounds. He's just proving to be a complete defenseman. And again, if the Flyers do look to trade at the deadline, they could definitely get a haul for this guy. Now, that said, they did just extend his contract 8 years last October. So we still got 7 years left at 6.25. I doubt the Flyers would be looking to trade him. But he is 27 years old. If they don't see their future in the short term and they're looking more long term, then maybe they would want to move this guy. He's going to be in his mid-30s when the contract expires. But realistically, I don't think he's going anywhere. Playing some great hockey for the Flyers and driving ticket prices up. My buddy who I just mentioned, Flyers fan, he's going back to Philly in a couple weeks to catch some games, and he was saying back in October tickets were dirt cheap when they were expected to not do so hot, and now they've almost doubled in price. So he should have bought those tickets early, but at least he's got a good team to go watch now. Taking a look at the bottom of the standings, and it pains me to say this, but the team with the current best odds for that first overall pick for Macklin Celebrini is the Chicago Blackhawks. Please, hockey gods, do not let this happen. The Sharks playing some decent hockey as of late. They have surpassed the Chicago Blackhawks. They got 21 points to Chicago's 19, but Chicago does have that extra game in hand. And just above those two teams are the Ducks and the Senators, both with 22 points. Looking over at the players' stats, Nikita Kucherov is still on a tear and still leading the way in terms of NHL scoring. He's got 52 points in 31 games, being the first player to reach that 50-point mark this season. And right behind him, Nathan MacKinnon, who's quietly sneaking up with the longest active point streak in the NHL. He's got a 15-game point streak where he's got 27 points in those 15 games. Now, Connor McDavid has a 12-game point streak, and he's got 28 points in those 12 games. So technically, McDavid's still the hottest player in the NHL right now, but credit to MacKinnon, who is closing that gap on Kucherov for the lead in the NHL. Looking over at the race for the Rocket Richard Trophy, both Austin Matthews and Brock Besser are tied with 23 goals on the season. However, Austin Matthews has done it in 27 games, still proving to be one of the best goal scorers in the world right now. But here is a crazy stat for you I saw the other day. Michael Carcone, ever heard of him? Carcone out of Arizona leads the league in 5-on-5 goals per 60 minutes. Now, I saw this on Twitter and I wanted to take a deeper dive into this. And not only did I see that he is leading this season in 5-on-5 goals per 60, but he is currently, this season, he has the best 5-on-5 goals per 60 percentage in NHL history. That's right. I know that sounds crazy, but the guy's right behind him to prove this isn't a meaningless stat. The guy behind him, Paul Kariya, you heard of him? And just behind Kariya, we got Austin Matthews and Pavel Bure. So, to explain this stat a bit further, Michael Carcone's played 29 games. He's got 12 even strength goals, but he only averages 11 minutes of ice time per night. The only guys this season with more even strength goals than Michael Carcone are Nikita Kucherov, Nathan MacKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Philip Forsberg, Kyle Connor, Brock Besser, and Austin Matthews. And out of all those guys, the least amount of ice time played is Brock Besser with 18 and a half minutes per game. And Michael Carcone averages 11 minutes and 9 seconds per game of ice time, and he's got 12 even strength goals. Pretty wild stat. Now, I don't understand why he's only averaging 11 minutes per game when he's scoring at the rate that he is. I can't really speak to the rest of his game as I haven't really watched him closely enough, but I'm sure Andre Tourigny has reasons for this. It just seems like a very, very wild stat. This kid is having a breakout season. We talked about him a bit before, a couple weeks ago. Just an undrafted kid, bounced around the AHL quite a bit. Finally got himself a permanent spot on an NHL roster, and this stat was just too good not to mention. Wild stuff. Now, moving on to the back and forth battle, which is the Norris Trophy race, or at least the scoring race amongst defensemen. Quinn Hughes has jumped ahead of Cale Makar now. He's got 39 points to Cale Makar's 37 points. However, Makar has missed 4 of the Avalanche's games this year. He's only played 27 games. So he does have a better point per game percentage than Quinn Hughes, but both defensemen, regardless, are playing incredible hockey, both making a strong claim for that Norris Trophy. And right behind those two studs is another guy that needs to be mentioned, and that is Noah Dobson out of New York. The Islanders defenseman is finally at a point per game, first time in his career. The former first-round draft pick is really having a breakout season, especially with the Islanders losing 2 of their other top defensemen in Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech, both of which are expected out until at least the end of December. But Noah Dobson is really coming out this year. He's got 32 points in 30 games played, and he is a plus 17 for the Islanders. My buddy here is a big Islanders fan. He's really high on Noah Dobson. He always has been. I remember him mentioning back when they made that run to the conference finals against the Tampa Bay Lightning how underrated Noah Dobson was at the time. He was only 20 years old during that run, and he got 7 assists in 19 games. He led the Islanders in defensive scoring. So just good to see this guy breaking out. Worth mentioning, he's got 16 assists in his last 10 games. Pretty impressive. Looking over at the rookie scoring race, of course, we still have young sensation Connor Bedard leading the way with 26 points in 30 games. A pretty wide margin to the 3 players tailing him, Adam Fantilli, Pavel Mintyukov, and Marco Rossi, all with 17 points. All right, and before we dive into the action this week, let's do like we have the past few weeks and take a look at this week in NHL history. On December 18th, in 1983, Wayne Gretzky picks up his 100th point of the season in game number 34. 34 games to get 100 points for Wayne Gretzky. It was a record at the time, and it's one that will likely stand forever. That is just crazy, crazy stuff. 100 points in 34 games. Imagine having a guy like that in fantasy. I don't know how they possibly did fantasy hockey back then. I don't know if they did. That's just a cheat code. I actually did hear a story. I don't know how true it is, but back in the 80s when they did first start fantasy hockey, Wayne Gretzky had to be split up between his goals and his assists. You have to draft one of the two, either his goals or assists, as kind of separate players. That's how good this guy was. Also, this week in history, on December 16th, 2014, the Panthers beat the Capitals in a 20-round shootout, which is still the longest shootout in NHL history. We had some pretty long shootouts this week, actually. The Habs lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins in a 12-round shootout, and the Kings took down the Kraken in a 9-round shootout, but nothing coming close to that day in history. 20-round shootout, still the longest standing shootout in NHL history. And finally, 13 years ago this week, Bobby Ryan scores a goal after picking up his opponent, Mikko Koivu's stick. After scoring the goal, he showed Mikko Koivu the stick that he used to score, which was also the wrong hand. Bobby Ryan's a righty, the stick he picked up was a lefty. Pretty cool moment in history. But enough about the past. Let's dive into what happened this week in the NHL. First, taking a look at some milestones. Jack Hughes becomes the fastest Devil in franchise history to reach 100 goals. It only took him 267 games. He achieved that milestone when he got a hat trick this week against the Blue Jackets. And we mentioned the Penguins not too long ago. Sidney Crosby kind of had two separate milestones this week. Earlier in the week, he recorded his 172nd three-point game, tying Stevie Yzerman for 7th all-time in three-point games. And just this morning against the Minnesota Wild, Sidney Crosby surpassed Mark Recchi for 13th all-time in regular season points with 1,535 points. He's only 4 points behind Joe Thornton, so I imagine he's going to pass Jumbo Joe sometime this coming week. Now, this may not be a milestone, but it is worth mentioning. Unfortunately, Alex Ovechkin is currently on his longest goalless streak in his career at 13 games. Everybody's watching to see if he's going to break that all-time scoring record that Wayne Gretzky has. It's looking a bit less and less likely as days go on. He's just not scoring at the rate he usually does. Took a pretty big drop off from last year. He got 42 goals last year, which is still very impressive. But this year, he's only got 5 in 28 games. That's a 15-goal season pace, which is scary because he's never gotten less than 30 goals in a full season. And in fact, his lowest was 24 goals in the COVID-shortened season where he only played 45 games. So if he finishes the season at this current pace, it'll be by far his worst season to date. I hope he picks it up. We all do. All hockey fans around the world want to see this guy keep scoring and hopefully break that record. A couple of first NHL goals this week as well. Leafs' Bobby McMann scored his first NHL goal in the 7-0 win against the Pittsburgh Penguins. He had quite the journey as well, actually, playing in college and then the ECHL, playing a few seasons in the AHL for the Marlies, and then getting the call-up. He did play 10 games last year, but he did not score. This year, however, he scored in his 7th game, and no doubt he took that puck home, something he'll remember forever. And also over in New York, Rangers forward Adam Edstrom scored his first NHL goal with 3 seconds left when they're already up 4-1. So it might not be the most impactful goal, but again, something he's going to remember forever. But weirdly enough, the very next day, the Rangers sent him down to the AHL. Fun little stint for him, came up, got a goal, went back down. Hopefully we see him get another shot in the big leagues and keep putting pucks in the net. Moving on to what was probably the biggest story this week in the NHL, St. Louis Blues head coach Craig Berube was fired after leading the Blues to a 13-14-1 start to the season. This came at a bit of a surprise, at least for me. The Blues, a team that I personally didn't really have high expectations for this season, and 27 points in 28 games to start the season isn't atrocious. After his firing, in a pre-game interview, Jordan Kyrou was asked about his relationship with Craig Berube, which he responded to with, "I've got no comment, he's not my coach anymore." Now, in that very same game, at the start when the announcer was calling out the starting lineup for the St. Louis Blues, there was raining boos to Jordan Kyrou's name, and then throughout the game, every time he touched the puck, the Blues fans would boo him hard. This led to a post-game interview where we can clearly hear the emotions. Have a listen.
Jordan, how difficult is it to have the fan base react the way they did tonight? Were you hearing the boos on the ice?
Yeah, definitely heard those. I mean, it's not easy, obviously, but I see where they're coming from, with how my comments sounded. So yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, I love playing here. I love playing in front of the fans. So yeah.
You're getting pretty emotional here. Where are the emotions coming from?
I mean, it's just tough, right? Like, I love playing here, so it's tough to hear the fans booing me there. Sorry.
Jordan Kyrou tearing up in the post-game interview when asked about the fans booing him. It was a bit tough to watch a player showing this much emotion. I don't think it was very fair for the fans to boo him. I understand why. Craig Berube is a beloved coach in St. Louis. He did bring that franchise their first Stanley Cup, but I don't think Jordan Kyrou really meant any ill will by saying what he said. Craig Berube is the only NHL coach that Jordan Kyrou has had. I don't know about the kind of relationship they had together, but obviously Berube was a big part of Kyrou's development, seeing as he was his only coach for the last 4 or 5 years. Regardless, the very next game, things got better as Jordan Kyrou put up a goal and 2 assists, including an OT assist as the St. Louis Blues beat the Dallas Stars with a score of 4-3. After Jordan Kyrou's goal in the second period, the fans gave him a standing ovation, and we even saw some fans holding up signs saying, "St. Louis loves you, Kyrou." It was really a nice moment in St. Louis, and Jordan Kyrou even got interviewed after the OT goal on the bench where he dropped a couple F-bombs, said how much he loves playing in St. Louis. Big smile on his face, the fans applaud him. So it all ended well. In a matter of a couple days, he went from being booed to emotional post-game interview to scoring a beautiful goal, getting a standing ovation, winning the game, helping the team score the OT winner with a nice, beautiful assist, and then capping it off with that interview. Good stuff from Jordan Kyrou. Good stuff from the St. Louis Blues. I didn't mention the replacement for Craig Berube was Drew Bannister, who was brought up from the AHL team Springfield. The St. Louis Blues also hired Brad Richards as a power play consultant. Brad Richards, a former Stanley Cup winner, a Conn Smythe winner in Tampa. It was actually also announced this year by the Tampa Bay Lightning that Brad Richards and Dave Andreychuk will be inducted into their franchise Hall of Fame. So, big week for Brad Richards. He joins his new team as a power play consultant, and hopefully they can turn things around. Much like the Wild and the Oilers, since the coaching change, the St. Louis Blues have gone on a bit of a winning streak. They've won 2 games with their new head coach. And it seems another team might want to follow that trend. The Ottawa Senators have finally fired their head coach, DJ Smith. I say finally because this one I definitely saw coming, and I'm surprised it did not happen earlier. I've been talking the past few weeks about Ottawa Senators and their play. I think it's a team going into the season. I thought they were going to be much, much better. They have the talent on paper. They got a lot of young, wicked, incredible players, but they just have not been winning games. They've been blowing leads. They come out hot. Their first period, every time I watch the Sens, first period, they come out flying. Looks like it's going to be a great game, and they just slow down. They come out in the second period or the third period, and they lose their juice. They start turning the puck over. They make weak defensive plays. They can't find the back of the net. The whole game just flips upside down, and they end up losing games. They are right now dead last in the division, dead last in the conference, and only 3 points ahead of Chicago Blackhawks for dead last in the NHL. Goodbye, DJ Smith. It might be tough for some of the players who have said that they do love playing for him, but this had to happen. Nothing was working in that locker room. Last week, Sens brought in Jacques Martin as a consultant to the team. Elliot Friedman on his podcast mentioned that he didn't think Jacques Martin wanted to step into a head coaching position just yet. He is an older man. He's been around the league for quite some time, but it seems that that was the plan all along. He is now the next head coach of the Ottawa Senators. He does have the interim tag for now. This is his second tenure as coach of the Sens. He's a very defensive-minded coach, which I think is what this team needs right now. Jacques Martin previously won the Jack Adams Award as the coach of the Ottawa Senators back in 1999. He's also coached in St. Louis, in Florida, and in Montreal. I remember he brought the Montreal Canadiens to the conference finals as the 8th seed. They probably had no business going that far, but again, a defensive-minded coach. I remember he changed the way that team played defense. So ultimately, I think this is a good move for the Ottawa Senators. I wonder with the Craig Berube firing if they might talk to him and maybe bring him in so that Jacques Martin can go back to his role as the senior advisor to the coaching staff. I think that'd be a great move for the Ottawa Senators. We've talked about how good of a coach Berube is, and I'm sure he could help turn that team around as well. While we're on the topic of the Ottawa Senators, we got to talk about that game between the Sens and the Canes this week, and specifically the penalty shot that happened. Goaltender Pyotr Kochetkov was called for throwing his stick as Brady Tkachuk came down on him. The call was a penalty shot immediately. First of all, that call itself I didn't really agree with. It didn't look like he threw his stick at all. He was kind of going post to post and dropped his stick. The stick did interfere with the puck, so maybe that's why the play was called. But anyway, Brady Tkachuk got a penalty shot. And on the ensuing penalty shot, Kochetkov came flying out with a poke check. And not only did he stop the puck, but he also sent Brady Tkachuk kind of flying into the boards. Now, it's a bit of a controversial one. I had to watch this one several times. Initially, I thought it was totally fine. I slowed it down. I looked at it. I thought it was fine. I had a discussion with some of my buddies. They pointed out some different angles. You could even freeze it at a certain point and see that Kochetkov's stick does make contact with Brady's skate before he stops the puck at all. So technically, I do think it was probably a trip. They should have given him another penalty shot. I don't know why the ref didn't call it. I don't think they're allowed to review that kind of play. Maybe it was a makeup for the bad penalty shot call in the first place. Again, I don't think it was a penalty shot. Brady Tkachuk also did have his head down flying in, so I think it was a right move for Kochetkov to come out for the poke check. We love seeing that kind of stuff. Hasek used to do it all the time. It makes the game for the goalies exciting. Got to keep players on their toes. But after the penalty shot, after Brady got back up, he does exactly what Brady does, and he started lipping off to Kochetkov. And you know what? Kochetkov did not back down either. They're both just giving each other words. The refs had to get in between them, both kind of chirping each other. And then Brady goes on to start yipping at the whole Canes bench. Now, Brady Tkachuk, I've said this guy is absolutely tapped. He is unhinged. He's a wicked player. He's fun to watch. I would love to have him as my captain, but I think it's getting a bit excessive now. It seems like every game, or at least every week, he's doing this kind of stuff where he's yelling at the other team, challenging the whole team to a fight, yelling at the bench. Now, they're losing games, and they're losing games bad. Maybe he's got to change something up. Maybe he's got to chill out, change his attitude. I don't know. I'm sure Sens fans are very conflicted on this. I know some fans love it, love seeing him yell every time and, challenge everybody to fights. Some other Sens fans I've talked to have said he's got to chill out a bit, at least wait until they start winning or, change something because it's not working and he's kind of making an ass of himself, maybe even making an ass of his teammates. I know that's the kind of player he is. He's a heated guy. He wears his heart on his sleeves. It's kind of like celebrating a goal when your team is down 5-0. You're getting pumped. There's no reason to celebrate. Or in this case, there's no reason to chirp the other team. You're getting pumped. Your team's laying an egg night in and night out. I think it might be a good idea for him to just take a step back and show a bit more composure on the ice. I'd love to see what other Sens fans think. It's a very, two-sided topic from what I've heard among Sens fans. So if you're a Sens fan listening to this, let us know what you think. Send us a DM or comment on one of our Instagram posts. Do whatever you got to do, but we're curious to hear what you think. Now, moving on to some other notable games this week, let's talk about Leafland real quick. They've had quite the roller coaster of a week. As they do, they're pretty much a roller coaster team. Last week, we talked about how they came back against the Islanders when Tavares got his 1,000th point and then ended up losing in overtime. The following game, the Leafs ended up pumping the Rangers 7-3. And then the next game after that, they came out with an awful dud against the Blue Jackets. They went down 5-0. And then going into the third period, down 5-0, they stormed back and scored 5 third-period goals, brought the fans back on their feet just to blow it again in overtime. The following game after that, without Austin Matthews, they destroy the Penguins 7-0. And in that game, you could hear the fans chanting "Dubas" as they mock their old GM who's up in the press box watching his team blow the game hard. That must have been tough for Dubas to watch as he didn't really leave Toronto in the best way. But just a crazy up and down week for the Maple Leafs. They will be playing the New York Rangers tomorrow. Like I said, they recently destroyed the Rangers 7-3. So I personally think the Rangers aren't going to let that happen again. I got the Rangers winning tomorrow. But who knows? I'm often wrong with my moneyline picks. But in bigger news, apparently the William Nylander contract conversation or negotiation has been put on a hold and probably won't amount to a contract extension until the offseason. Now, whether that is he signs again with the Leafs or starts talking to other teams and signs in free agency elsewhere. But apparently he's not going to be extending his contract this season. He's going to focus on hockey, and that makes me wonder. Now, a couple of weeks ago when Nylander was red hot, when he was on his season-starting streak, he was one of the hottest players in the NHL, I brought up a wild blockbuster trade, and I'm thinking about it again. I wonder if the move for the Toronto Maple Leafs is to trade him at the deadline again for pieces that they need, like defense, because they might lose him for nothing in the offseason, and that would be a huge loss. Now, I know you want this kind of guy for a playoff run. Of course, any team would want to keep Willie Nylander for a playoff run. But if you could trade him and pick up some valuable picks as well as pieces that you might need in the playoffs, that might suit the Leafs better in this playoff run and be better long-term as opposed to losing him for absolutely nothing. Now, taking a look at the other side of that potential trade, it would have to be a team that's willing to take on a rental for a big playoff push and a team that needs offense and can spare some defensive pieces to the Toronto Maple Leafs. A team that comes to mind for me might be the Pittsburgh Penguins, as they are probably looking to make a final push as they still have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang on the end of their careers, and they traded big this summer to get Erik Karlsson. They've been having some awful scoring struggles, and I think bringing in William Nylander could help them a lot. Now, right now, they're on the outside of the playoffs looking in, so if that trade were to happen, I think it would have to be sooner than later so the Pittsburgh Penguins can start making that push to get that playoff spot. Another team that might be a good suitor would be the Florida Panthers, as they kind of struggle scoring for a team that is in a playoff spot, and they have a lot of solid defensive pieces that they might be willing to move. So we're definitely going to be keeping an eye and an ear out on some trade rumors. I think there's going to be some trades definitely coming around the league soon involving some other teams that we're about to mention. But now that we're on the topic, let's talk about some trades that already did happen this past week. Thomas Tatar was traded to the Seattle Kraken for a 5th-round pick from the Colorado Avalanche. Now, Colorado signed Tatar this offseason to a 1-year, $1.5 million contract, and I think that was an incredible signing. I've talked about it before on this podcast, how I think 1-year signings to veteran players that could add some depth to your lineup is a no-brainer. It's a win-win. There's no risk involved, and if it doesn't end up that he fits into your lineup, you can move him for, even if it's a 7th piece or a 6th piece. A lot of guys aren't going to be afraid to take on a Thomas Tatar contract for $1.5 million. A guy that has been able to score as of late. He's a consistent 20-goal scorer, at least he was, and he could add some firepower to your power play. And actually, since he has come over to Seattle, he's been playing on that top line with Matty Beniers. So he's a guy that could just slot in nicely, kind of anywhere up and down the lineup. He's not the best defensively. That is a reason why he is often a healthy scratch. The past few seasons, a lot of coaches don't really trust him in the defensive zone or in defensive situations. But again, it's a no-risk play. I love the signing by Colorado, and Seattle had to give up a 5th-round pick, which isn't insignificant. So great for Colorado for getting that pick for what was a free agent, literally a free signing. And from Tatar's perspective, I'm sure he's very happy with the trade. He gets to play a lot more in Seattle, a team that has been struggling of late. Elsewhere in the league, one of the biggest roster moves of the week, the Carolina Hurricanes have placed their currently starting goaltender Antti Ranta on waivers, as he has been putting up some pretty bad numbers. He's got the worst save percentage of all starting goalies in the NHL. Now, I say starter because Frederik Andersen has been out for some time, and he's looking like he might miss the rest of the season. So Ranta has jumped into that starting role, and he has not played very well. Like I said, worst save percentage of the entire league for starting goalies, or at least goalies that have played at least 10 games. .854 save percentage, which is not going to cut it for a team that needs to be playing better than they have been so far. A lot of people had the Carolina Hurricanes finishing near the top of the division, and currently they are barely holding on to a wild card spot. So, goaltending troubles have been hurting this team, and they need to sort that out as soon as possible. Kochetkov is now going to be the starter for the team, and since they put Ranta on waivers, they needed to call someone up. So they brought up Yaniv Peretz from the ECHL. This guy has not played a single AHL game. He jumped right from the ECHL to the NHL. Now, this is likely just to fill up a roster spot. I don't expect him to play any games with the Carolina Hurricanes. And since the announcement actually just this morning, the Carolina Hurricanes have signed Aaron Dell to a professional tryout. So I'm sure they're going to hopefully have him slot in as the backup goalie to Kochetkov. But all this said, I think they're not going to stop there. They should go out and look for a goalie. Now, we've been talking about goalie trades for quite some time. There's a few teams around the league that need goaltending. Edmonton Oilers started off awful with their goalies. Stuart Sinner is kind of finding his game. The New Jersey Devils also have not been playing the way they should be and not performing to their expectations. They are probably looking for a goaltender as well. But no team now is more desperate than the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think a move will happen sooner than later. Definitely before the trade deadline. Definitely weeks before the trade deadline, in my opinion. Now, what teams could offer goaltenders? Like I said, we've talked about this a couple times, but it's worth mentioning again. The Montreal Canadiens have 3 NHL goalies in their system, and I don't think they want to keep all 3 around for some time because it's taken away playing time from the other 2. As we've mentioned before, Jake Allen would be the auto and out, so I think he is definitely a target for the Carolina Hurricanes. Other teams that we mentioned in the past have 3 goaltenders are the Detroit Red Wings. They are going with Alex Line, Ville Husso, and James Reimer. James Reimer, a veteran who's been a solid backup and starter for various teams around the NHL. I think he could also be a good piece for the Carolina Hurricanes, though I do think he would probably only be fit for a backup position right now to Kochetkov. So in that case, I think Jake Allen is a more attractive piece. But if we look over at other teams like the Columbus Blue Jackets, who also have 3 solid goaltender pieces, and honestly, I think it's time for the Blue Jackets to part ways with Elvis Merzlikis. He's been their goaltender for quite some time, and he's developed into a solid number 1 goaltender. He does have a cap hit of 5 mil, 5.4 to be exact, so I'm not sure if Carolina will be able to take that on, but I do think it is a good opportunity for Columbus to move him and get some good pieces in return. They're obviously a team who should be looking to the rebuild. They did have a high draft pick this year in Adam Fantilli, but clearly from the look of their on-ice play, they're not ready to make a push for a playoff spot. So moving a guy like Elvis, who's got some good value right now, could be a good option for Kekalainen. They do have 2 other younger goaltenders in Spencer Martin and Daniil Tarasov. Now, Spencer Martin, who they got off waivers earlier this year from the Vancouver Canucks, is a UFA at the end of this year. So if for whatever reason the Blue Jackets don't want to move Elvis, they probably will not have any trouble moving Spencer Martin to the Carolina Hurricanes, who can be a rental goalie with a very low cap hit, I might add. And Spencer Martin has proven that he could be a solid backup goalie, as he's put in some decent numbers in Columbus. He's got an 8.92 save percentage, which isn't that bad if you consider the team that's playing in front of him. He does only have 2 wins in his 9 starts this season, but again, it's a cheap piece that the Carolina Hurricanes can acquire. Cheap in terms of cap hit, and I can't imagine his value is too high for the Columbus Blue Jackets to be demanding a high return. So he's definitely an option there. But regardless, I think the Carolina Hurricanes are definitely shopping around for a goaltender around the league. We've mentioned John Gibson before. We talked about him a lot last week. He is probably their favorite option, but he might be the hardest one to acquire. But anyway, things are buzzing in rumor land and in trade talks, so there's some excitement coming up. Hopefully we'll get a little Christmas present or a New Year's present with a blockbuster trade. Would love to see that. Zach Parise is looking to make a comeback to the NHL. He's been training quite a bit, and Phil the Thrill, Phil Kessel, is also adamant on making a comeback to the NHL. He's mentioned that he is willing to sacrifice his Ironman streak just to get another season in. He wants to play some hockey. I'm surprised no team has signed him before. Again, like I said, a 1-year low-risk contract would be beneficial for a lot of teams, in my opinion, but there's a lot of smarter minds out there that say otherwise, so I guess there's a reason he has not signed yet. But I think it's safe to say that most hockey fans would love to see this guy signed, and even Parise, both 2 veterans that have given a lot to the game, and Phil's just a hilarious guy to watch. He does some funny stuff in post-game interviews. He's apparently hilarious in the locker room. A lot of guys love playing with him, so someone give Phil a contract. Now it's time to talk about some reffing controversies around the league. It's safe to say there's going to be a couple of these every week at this point. Boston Bruins' David Pastrnak was given a game misconduct for a hit from behind on Ryan Lindgren. Now, he didn't get a hearing, so there will be no suspension for Pastrnak, but it was a pretty big hit from behind that ended up getting the hockey world talking. Now, the reason why it's controversial is because a lot of players, a lot of coaches, a lot of people have been saying that they don't really know what a boarding penalty is anymore because of the inconsistencies in the way it's been called. Now, last week, Kyle Okposo of the Buffalo Sabres came out and kind of complained about it, I guess, complained about the refs, because in his game against the Montreal Canadiens, his teammate Eric Robinson was given a game misconduct for his hit on Justin Barron. Actually, Randy, why don't you roll the clip so we could hear what Kyle Okposo said in his interview?
Do you disagree with Eric getting 5 in a major for that hit?
I do. Like I was telling Trevor, I mean, we're having a conversation out there. I don't understand how Evander Kane gets nothing last night, and then there's a 5-minute penalty. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's the exact same play. There's an injury on the play. I understand that he has to call it, and that's fine. That's not on him. I just don't like the consistency factor. Like that's a literal identical play with zero penalty, and then one with a 5 in a game. Doesn't make sense.
Okposo clearly voicing his frustration as his teammate was given a game misconduct, and then the night prior, which Okposo referenced to, Evander Kane did a very similar, pretty much the exact same hit where he did not even get a penalty, no hearing, no suspension. So this penalty has been called very inconsistently amongst the refs across varying games. I don't know if the NHL has to, have a meeting with the GMs, with the coaches, or have the refs kind of clarify the rules to the coaches. I don't know what they got to do, but they should definitely figure out this officiating controversy because it's just going to keep making some bad headlines for the NHL. We mentioned a couple weeks back how John Tortorella said he doesn't think players in the league can take and receive big hits anymore. There seems to be a lot more hits from behind this season than ever before, especially in the past couple of weeks. If we talk about the David Pastrnak hit, I personally think it was the right move not to suspend him. It was a boarding hit, but the problem was Lindgren turned his back at the last possible second. The hit would have been a clean shoulder-to-shoulder hit had he not turned at the last second, and the turn seemed kind of unnecessary. He wasn't really protecting the puck. He didn't really have the puck even. He turned before he reached the puck, so it was a weird move for him to make. Now, I've even heard opinions that a lot of players are turning their backs on purpose to get a call or to even get the player kicked out of the game with a 5-minute major power play. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Either way, I think it's very important for the league to address this situation and clear up this confusion so we could avoid more hits from behind and further controversies. Thankfully, there are no major injuries this week due to hits from behind. However, there were a couple of bad injuries for some teams. Phoenix Copley was hurt in practice for the LA Kings, so he is now placed on LTIR, where he will have to miss a minimum of 10 games. Ryan Reeves from the Toronto Maple Leafs also placed on LTIR. Not sure how much that's going to hurt the Toronto Maple Leafs, though. TJ Oshie also placed on IR due to a lower body injury, and Mats Zuccarello is considered week to week with an upper body injury. That's a big loss for Minnesota. He's been playing some good hockey over there. Now, before we move on, I do want to mention that our thoughts and prayers go out to Brady Grasdell and his family and friends, a 21-year-old Canadian defenseman who last played in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League has passed away tragically. According to the obituary, he took his own life after jumping out of a fourth-floor hotel in Bavaria, Dominican Republic, where he was at the time. Myself and the Puck Drop family send our condolences to his family and friends. Rest in peace, Brady Grasdall. Now, before we move on to our good, bad, and ugly segment to finish off the episode, let's talk about some quick feel-good stories around the league. Gabriel Landeskog was seen in Colorado. He flew in from Toronto where he's doing his post-surgery rehab and recovery. He was there for the Buffalo Sabres Colorado Avalanche game to welcome back former teammate Eric Johnson. Him and his kids held up signs saying, "We still love you, Eric, even though you're wearing the wrong team." It was a nice little sign. Good to see Landeskog in the crowd. Cheering for his old buddy, actually probably cheering for his team, so better yet cheering against his buddy, but good fun, very nice to see. Also this week, the Arizona Coyotes went to Pittsburgh to play the Penguins, and before the game, there were some clips showing Logan Cooley playing in Sidney Crosby's camp when he was 4 years old. Pretty cool to see 4-year-old Logan Cooley skating in the Sidney Crosby camp, and then going head-to-head with him in the opening face-off puck drop. Just goes to show how long Crosby's been around and how long he's been dominating the game. Another cool thing this week that was so close to being another big milestone, Lucas Dostal of the Anaheim Ducks went for the empty net. Almost got a goalie goal. He missed by a centimeter. Well, he missed the post by a centimeter, so he missed the goal by what, inches? Either way, very, very close. Would have been awesome to see another goalie goal this year. And a couple more notes before we move on to our last segment. The Washington Capitals announced that they will be moving arenas. They're going to be leaving Washington, D.C. and going to a new arena in Virginia. The Washington Wizards are also moving as well, so it must be something to do with the arena or the owners of the team. I'm not too sure about the details, but something worth noting in the news this week. Also, Mackenzie Blackwood of the San Jose Sharks lost his skate blade against the post. Now, earlier on in the Puck Drop season, we mentioned the skates, how the new skate blades can just pop out of the skates conveniently for the trainers to sharpen them or replace them, but how it's kind of been backfiring a lot. A lot of players are losing their skate blades mid-shift, and it's putting them in some difficult positions, and this time it happened to a goalie. Pretty funny thing to see. And our final note, and this was awesome. This was very funny. Marc-Andre Fleury returned to Pittsburgh with his Minnesota Wild. Now, unfortunately, he was not put in as the starting goalie for the game, but he still found a way to make himself heard. Now, Marc-Andre Fleury, for those of you who don't know, has been known to be quite the prankster in the past, and he somehow was able to sneak into the Pittsburgh Penguins dressing room, and he swapped Chris Letang's helmets. Now, Pittsburgh Penguins were the home team, and they typically wear their dark helmets, but Marc-Andre Fleury swapped it with his white helmet, and Chris Letang was seen going down the tunnel in his white helmet. He almost went out for warm-ups in the wrong colored helmet before his trainer stopped him and told him to switch them, because had he gone out with the white helmet, he would have been fined. But still a hilarious prank by Marc-Andre Fleury, who still got it in him. During that game, also, the Pittsburgh Penguins fans were chanting, "We want Fleury, we want Fleury." So they haven't forgotten that legend. He's going to be a Hall of Famer for sure, and he's going to go down as one of the greatest goalies in Pittsburgh Penguins franchise history. And one of the best prankers as well, it seems. Now it's time for our good, bad, and ugly. Starting off with our good for week 10, and I'm sure you didn't think I was going to go a week without mentioning Connor Bedard. Well, this is it. Connor Bedard, his release this week absolutely blew my mind. Now, this isn't the first time he did what we saw, but it's really becoming to me his signature shot. That goal he got this week in the Battle of the Connors against the Edmonton Oilers was absolutely wild. Streaking up the left side with the puck, he skates in and he waits for Ekholm to kind of poke it with his stick, and he shoots between the triangle, but the way he pulls the puck back and releases it in milliseconds with a wicked powerful shot and the accuracy he gets to put it right over Stuart Skinner's shoulder, it just blows my mind. And it's not the first time we've seen him do it. He did it earlier in the season against the Florida Panthers. But I just don't understand how he could pull it back so fast and then release it with that much power and that much accuracy. Honestly, I sound like a broken record. I've mentioned it before. I've praised this guy's shot so many times, and so has everyone else who's watched hockey. But that shot, that goal this week, made my jaw literally drop. I think that shot is this guy's new signature move. Now, we've seen other players around the league do it, but nobody's done it the way he has. And I think he's the best at it, and I'm sure he's going to be doing it a lot because there's honestly not much you can do to defend it. Ekholm, if he didn't put his stick the way he did, I'm sure Connor Bedard could have beat him to the outside or used his body to protect the puck. So Ekholm used his reach to kind of, disrupt the play, but Connor Bedard just found the best way possible to pull it back, use the triangle, almost use Ekholm's stick as a slingshot and just rip it home. It was a beautiful, beautiful goal. So Connor Bedard, you are my good for this week. Now, moving on to the bad, and that goes to the Chicago Wolves. Don't worry, not the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm not trashing the Blackhawks every week. The Chicago Wolves head coach has been suspended 10 games for using a homophobic slur towards the referee in a game. Head coach Bob Nardella became agitated by a penalty call during the final period of the team's game against the Texas Stars, and in disputing the call, Nardella allegedly directed an anti-gay slur at a referee and was given a game misconduct for abusing the officials, and then later the AHL suspended him for 10 games as a consequence of his actions, which they claimed included homophobic language. Now, after the suspension was announced, Nardella made a statement pretty much denying the allegations, saying that he firmly denies making a homophobic remark and condemns all form of discrimination in hockey. This was his quote. I would like to set the record straight that I did not say what I am accused of saying. I have had the honor of working in and around professional hockey for more than 30 years, and in all of those years, I've done my best to make hockey a safe space for everyone involved. The accusations made against me are incredibly upsetting because that is not the type of person I am. End quote. So it's a bit of a he said, she said situation. It'll be hard for us to know exactly how it went down or what the truth was unless one of the referees or even one of the players on the team comes out to clarify it. But for now, it's still a bad headline. There's been some homophobic and some racial slurs in the past few years around hockey, and it's something that all of hockey leagues are trying to eliminate and get rid of. They want hockey to be a safe space for everyone, of course. It's 2023, almost 2024. This stuff should be gone from the game. This stuff should be gone from society. Nobody should be, using these homophobic slurs in an offensive way, in an attacking way against individuals, whether they are homosexual or not. It doesn't matter. These words should not be used in any sort of context that is offensive to anyone. So that's our bad headline for this week. And our ugly headline is even worse, in my opinion, because of something that happened earlier this year. Martin Ferk of the Swiss League was suspended for 5 games for a kick to the face. Now, Martin Ferk got hit into the bench, and the way he swung his legs around, flailing his legs around, his skates very close to someone's face, was very scary and disgusting and very, very stupid, especially in light of what happened recently with Adam Johnson. It was ridiculous watching him do what he did. It was very obvious that it was on purpose. It's not like any of the allegations toward Matt Petgrave, whether he did it on purpose or not. This one, you can clearly see it was very much on purpose. He had his legs, he swung them at least like 2-3 times, kind of like he was swimming through air with that many kicks. It was just such a stupid play, and it could have resulted in a horrible, horrible accident. I'm very happy it didn't. We're all very thankful that nothing bad happened, but he deserves that suspension. It was a ridiculous play. Martin Ferk, you got to smarten up. Don't ever do that again. That was ugly. All right. Now, let's end this episode as we do. It's been a good one. Randy told me before we started recording that there were no fan-submitted questions this week. So, fans, if you got any questions, send DMs. I would love to answer them live on the podcast. For now, let's move ahead to the trivia. Now, for those who haven't checked on the Instagram page or are just listening to the podcast and is curious, the answer to last week's trivia question is Matt Barzal. He had the second best rookie season in terms of point per game after Connor McDavid. In the last 10 years, that is. Now, for this week's trivia question, we've been talking about a lot of vets who have been around for a while and have played for their teams for quite some time. We mentioned Alex Ovechkin earlier, a legend of the game, chasing a record. Well, he leads the way in this trivia question. Of all the teams who have the longest tenure on their hockey team, Ovechkin is number 1. Anze Kopitar is number 2. Who is number 3? Now, to clarify what I mean by that, which player has played the third most consecutive games for one franchise? Active player. Number 1 is Ovechkin. Number 2 is Anze Kopitar. Who is the third player to play the most games for their single franchise? Let us know what you think. The post will be made on Instagram very soon. Make sure to comment your answer. Check in a few days later for the answer. And as always, do not forget to tune in to next week's Puck Drop episode. Thank you all very much for listening. I can't wait to drop another one next week with a lot of action, I'm sure, to come. Hopefully some trades. Hopefully we see a goalie move. And hopefully we see some more beautiful